Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey is now playing at a theater near you that hosts Fathom events. Did this movie bother to do better than the first one, or did it still end up a big steaming pile of Pooh Bear? Let's get into this. Welcome to the Cinefanatics. My name is Robert Adams, and I've seen Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, and I don't know if this is something I should be bragging about. Before I get into my review, though, let me know your thoughts, feelings, opinions down below in the comments. While you're down there, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. We're doing all kinds of fun things over here. Come follow us on this journey. Let's jump into Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. Good Lord, what a title. Yeah, so for a quick background, I didn't necessarily hate the first movie. I think it was okay for a low-budget indie slasher. It made complete sense. The acting wasn't that good. The special effects wasn't that good. The story, I feel like, was just extremely basic. Kind of the issue that I have is when IP enters public domain, I'm not a huge fan of everyone just immediately jumping in on it and trying to profit off of it. Granted, I get it. That's the point of it being in public domain, that anyone who is of the creative sort now has the ability to use these characters in such a way that we haven't seen them before. Much like I'm a big fan of doing cartoon character voices and making them say things that we never got to hear these cartoon characters saying. The Earthling took my vibrator. Someone stop him. That's always funny. Anyways, I get it. I understand that's why this is public domain. And they are free. The filmmakers are free to use Winnie the Pooh based off the books by A.A. Milne. They are free to use it however they want. That's great. It's just, it feels kind of dirty to me. I don't know why. It's like the same thing is happening with like the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse the Second. Even before it was actually officially public domain, there was already an announcement of like 2 or 3 horror movies. Like, why do we always immediately go horror? Never mind, I already answered my own question. Whatever. But otherwise, that first Blood and Honey movie, it wasn't the greatest, but I get it. Indie beginner, just kind of starting off with this idea. But I want to cover Blood and Honey 2, the good, the bad, and why the hell is Simon Callow in this movie? That man is a respected British actor. He's been nominated for BAFTAs. He's won a SAG award for being a part of the cast of Shakespeare in Love. Those of you who might be my age may be more familiar with him as Vincent Cabby, the villain in Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Why is he in this movie? I honestly don't have an answer, but it was pleasant seeing him. I always like seeing Simon Callow. I think he's a very fine actor, and it's just weird, man. It's just a little weird, just strange. Anyways, let's jump into some positives first, because surprisingly, there are positives from this movie. First thing, this movie has a much bigger budget. Thanks to all of you who decided to go see the virality of the original movie and it making $5 million on a budget of $100,000. Good Lord. We should all be that blessed. Because of you, this movie was given a budget. It's reported to be somewhere around $1 million. Granted, that's a huge increase from the first movie, but it's not that big in terms of movies that are made nowadays. I mean, granted, this isn't a big, like, Marvel MCU blockbuster that costs like $100 million, $250 million, whatever. It's not a huge movie like that, but $1 million for an indie horror movie, still pretty good. It's still pretty justified, but it's not the best, and I'll cover why here in a little bit. But it is a much bigger budget, and I love the fact that you can actually see this bigger budget on the screen. Like, they put it right there front and center, and I love it. I think they did a good job with that, so kudos to them for this. So diving into details of exactly where this budget went, the special effects looked a lot better in this movie, like head and shoulders above the first one. There's no like stupid like green screen like whatever effects. And granted, the first movie had some really good kills and gore effects, but there's a lot more better ones in this movie, and I think that's a very good positive for it. Granted, there is still a lot of like CGI used, predominantly wherever we see blood splatters, it is that CGI blood. There is a couple of times we see fire effects, and you can obviously tell it's like not actually there, it's CGI fire. But again, keep in mind, this is $1 million budget. Granted, for us ordinary folks, $1 million, that's a lot of money. It's a life-changing amount of money. For a movie, $1 million is still not that much. That's still peanuts. So again, put that in comparison to the first movie that had a $100,000 budget, and you can see why it was not looked at too favorably. $1 million budget, while much better, still isn't a lot of money, and therefore it shows. So I'm not going to hold that against them. I'm just happy that they got the money to be able to do something more with it, and I appreciate what they did with that money. It looked good. Speaking of looking good, a number one contention about the first movie were the masks. The Winnie the Pooh mask specifically is a mask that you could have just bought online yourself and had like the official Winnie the Pooh blood and honey mask and run around for Halloween acting like the Winnie the Pooh killer from that movie. That's not in this one. This one looks like it's some kind of combination between a mask and just a full-on prosthetic, especially in close-ups. And that was what I really liked about this, is we got some good, very well-lit close-ups of Winnie the Pooh's face, and it just looked so much better. Seeing the whiskers, the fur off of his face, getting that close-up of the detail around the eye, and it actually looked not like a person in a mask. It still didn't look the best. Like, I've seen better, but for a low-budget horror movie, it looked good, and I was all for it, and I appreciate it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was great. So, kudos to the filmmakers for that, upping the masks and the makeup. Good job, guys. Also, the acting is a little bit better, so that definitely helps. We do have some lines that feel forced, and like I don't feel like the actors are giving it their all, but it is a significant step up from the first movie. So kudos again to everyone involved in that. Y'all did a good job. I love seeing, especially in sequels like this, where we are increasing the value, and I think they did a good job with that, honestly. Best example in this is going to be the fact that they recasted the actor who plays Christopher Robin. I'm not sure who that was in the first movie. I do know that in the second movie, the acting of Christopher Robin was switched over to producer Scott Chambers, who produced this movie. And I like the fact that he went very hands-on with this role. Like, let me take reign of the central focus, the central protagonist of this movie, and I think he does a good job. Like, I wasn't questioning any of his acting ability. Some of the lines might have been a little bit cheesy, but I'll get into that here in a little bit as well. But I think he does a very good job and was very believable as a more adult Christopher Robin. So kudos on to him. The reason that I feel like that they recasted him, and I don't want to dive into too many spoilers. I'm not going to dive into like who killed who, but there's something here that I thought was kind of interesting that I do want to talk about. This isn't really spoilery, as I was saying, but it's kind of interesting that the original, the first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, is actually a movie within this movie. Like, there's a kid that's watching the original Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey on TV within this movie. And typically, I'm completely against that, because all that does is it takes your audience out of the movie, and we're all like, what? Huh? This doesn't make any sense. This is supposed to be the same universe. Why is this a movie within the movie we're watching after watching the previous movie? But as this movie continues, you start to understand that basically what this Blood and Honey 2, what it's setting up, is that first movie was just a telling of the events that actually happened. That movie that we saw, those of you who chose to see it, that movie was an adaptation of the actual events that still actually happened in the 100-Acre Woods. If this makes any sense at all. So it was a retelling of that within the universe of this movie. So that's why the Christopher Robin actor was recasted, because this movie, Blood and Honey 2, Scott Chambers is playing the actual Christopher Robin, while the actor who was in the first movie was an actor within the movie retelling the stories of the massacre of the 100-Acre Woods, which gets brought up a lot in this movie. So while I'm not a huge fan of incorporating the previous movie within the sequel, because again, that's confusing and it takes people out of the movie. It sounds a little weird, but I kind of think it's a genius move. And yes, I know, genius is definitely a word. But I think it was a good idea on the parts of the filmmakers and the writer to incorporate that in here. And it's a nice way, subliminally, to get past all the naysayers of the first movie. If you were one of the millions of people that just did not like the first Blood and Honey, this is a good way for them to say, hey, that movie was just a movie. That wasn't what's actually happening within our world. So you saw that movie, it looked terrible, it was meant to be terrible, shut the hell up, let's move on. Here's the real Winnie the Pooh universe, or as it's going to be known, the Poohniverse. I feel dirty saying it like that, like the Poohniverse. But this is the actual starting point of the Poohniverse from here on out. And the previous movie is just completely, while it is based on events that did happen within the Poohniverse, it is not an official Poohniverse movie. I am so tired of saying that. Anyways, moving on. Alright, so for the negatives on this movie, because you knew they were coming, it's a Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movie. There's going to be negatives. Sorry. The story of this movie is seemingly kind of all over the place. We are dealing with Christopher Robin, who is having to deal with the fact that no one believes him in his telling of what happened in the events of the first movie. Everyone just suspects that Christopher Robin is the murderer of all the kids, the teenagers and whatnot in the first movie. This is very similar to Scream 6, where it was seemingly that Melissa Barrera's character, Sam, was actually the killer from Scream 5 when she wasn't, and there actually was a killer in Scream 5. Kind of the same idea. Everyone just blames Christopher Robin for all those murders when he didn't actually commit them, and now he's having to live his life in shame and hiding and whatnot because people just don't trust him, which was an interesting angle to take. But the fact is, that is just one part of it, and it splits off into multiple directions from there. They all come back to the same central idea that Christopher Robin is just trying to put his life straight. But there's just so much jumping around, and it does get a little bit slow pace at some points, in so much that I will be honest, after working a full day at my job, I was gonna kind of drift off a little bit while watching this movie, which is not something I like to do, but it is something that just naturally happens. I'm a human being, I get tired, we all do this. Moving on. So it does feel a little disjointed, but at least it had a clear direction of where it's going. And this might be because of the fact that the filmmakers have a clear idea of where they want this to go. They are building up to their Poohniverse, very much like the Avengers from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We have all these individual movies. Of course, we're going to have a Bambi and Peter Pan and Pinocchio movie coming out pretty soon that are all going to be part of the same universe, leading up to this movie where all of these Disney characters, for all intents and purposes, all team up in a full-fledged Avengers-like horror movie. So it's a little strange, not gonna lie. I do, however, like the fact that this movie is written by Matt Leslie, who co-wrote Summer of '84, which was a fantastic movie, and if you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. It's very much like Goonies or Stand By Me, Monster Squad, one of those movies from the 80s that involve teenagers just teaming up and going on an adventure, very much like Stranger Things as well, mixed with a little bit of Hitchcock's Rear Window. It was an entertaining movie. So it's Matt Leslie who co-wrote that movie, is also the writer for this movie. So I love the fact that he's branching out and getting work like that as well. And again, I thought the story, while jumbled and kind of disjointed all over the place, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it did still show a clear direction of where the filmmakers are wanting to take this franchise and this property. The Poohniverse. Other downsides to this, there are some scenes in this movie that are just really dark that makes it hard to see. And that's what happens in horror movies. There's been a multitude of horror movies that I have seen that are really dark. Of course, the standout example is always going to be Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which is so dark that you really can't see anything at all, and it really hurts the enjoyment of watching that movie. I want to see the aliens and the predators mess up some people. I want to see that blood. I want to see that gore. I want to see them get ripped apart. Apparently I need therapy, but I want to see this. And you're hiding it in the dark. Sometimes it's used to kind of, if the budget is not as high as they would like, they kind of need to hide some of this instead of showing us the detail they could go into, whether they chose to use practical effects or digital effects. It's just meant to hide the lack of the budget. Sure, I understand that makes complete sense. But this movie is doing that along with quick cutting editing, which I'm not a huge fan of ever. Notorious on that is going to be the Transformers movies, where you have giant robots punching and kicking, and all you see is quick shots of jumbled metal moving around in the air. I can't follow what's going on. I don't understand who's getting the upper hand in a fight. Venom, the ending of the first Venom movie with Venom versus Riot. It's all two giant blobs of symbiotes. I can't tell who's punching who or who's kicking who or who's doing what. That kind of stuff happens in this movie as well. There's a lot of close-up shots where we don't know exactly what body part we're looking at. Hopefully it's a good one, but we can't tell exactly what's being punched or stabbed or gored out or whatever. So that makes it kind of confusing, and I would like to be able to see that so I have a clear understanding of who's being maimed and how they're being maimed and what's their disability throughout the rest of this movie. Should they still live through their being attacked? I don't know. I didn't get to see that, and we're just left with, oh, okay, I guess that's how that fight went. My only other real negative on this, and unfortunately this is something that's going to be very hard to avoid, and it's more of a matter of your own ear and how you perceive things. This is a cast of a lot of predominantly British actors, and a lot of them have very heavy, very thick accents, and it gets kind of hard to understand exactly what they're saying, and especially if it's a situation where two characters are quietly talking to each other. It almost comes off as more of a mumble, and it's really hard to make out like the individual syllables of what they're saying because of the heavy, thick accent and the inability to project in that moment with that dialogue. So there's probably a lot of things that were easily explained that I missed out on, and that may have attributed to why I felt this movie was disjointed. There was probably an explanation for whatever was happening in any particular scene, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know it because I didn't hear the dialogue that was setting that up. So that's also a negative. Again, that might be your mileage may vary. It may just be me. I do tend to have a very hard ability to understand heavy, thick accents, especially over the phone. I work customer service, and to those of you that have a very thick, heavy accent, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. I honestly am. I don't mean to offend, but whew, it is hard sometimes, just to be honest. Anyways, I think that's roughly about it. It is a step up from the first movie, easily. As of right now, just getting out of the movie, I'm back at home filming this review. Last I checked, this movie has a 100% rating based off of 7 critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. I do not expect that to last. I will expect, and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but I expect that number is going to plummet and far. So it is, again, it's not a cohesive story, but it is a lot better. It is a huge step up from the first movie. And no matter what, I do applaud the filmmakers for basically giving us that first movie that was setting like a tone or a pace, and then going above it, rising above and making something better. I think they did a good job with this, and I will be honest, I am kind of looking forward to see what else they come up with. I'm not going to completely shun them or be against them, because we've all seen what happens when you do that on the internet. I do think that they have a good foundation to continue building on, and I'm kind of curious to see what else they can do with it. Again, not trying to capitalize off of public domain. I feel that can get a little bit cheap, and it is a quick cash grab, but I think they did a decent job with it this time around compared to the first movie. They heard about the complaints of the first movie. The fact that the first movie was pretty much on every single, like, critics' number one worst of 2023. It seems like they learned from that and they built upon it and they did something better. Is it great? Is it going to be one of the best horror movies this year? No, it's not. It's definitely not. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be the worst. That cursed swimming pool movie still came out this year, so you're fine so far. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Y'all are doing at least better than that, in my opinion. So, anyways, that's going to do it for this review. What are your hopes for this? I'm going to take into account that you probably haven't seen this movie, and I don't know if you're going to see this movie based off of this review, but let me know that down below in the comments. But what are your thoughts? How much did you absolutely hate that first Blood and Honey movie? And are you hopeful? Do you think that this may help you in your decision to go see the second one? Let me know down below in the comments. While you're down there, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We're doing all kinds of fun things here on Cinefanatics. Come join us for all of that as we continue to increase our numbers and just talk about movies a lot. It's so much fun. So yeah, come join us for all that. You can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The Cinefanatics. You can follow me at RCA Reacts on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and YouTube.com/@RCA Reacts. Anyways, that's going to be it for this review. Thank you for watching. I very much appreciate each and every one of you that take time out of your personal day to give me and my brother and this channel a view. Very much, absolutely love it. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Poohniverse.